Today on the Bass Channel, we're not only talking about the Sadowsky MetroExpress, but more specifically why you'd want this over a Fender. So before we get going, let me be a little bit more honest and transparent than normal with you, the viewer. First of all, there seems to be this slightly common misconception that any gear demo that myself or any other bass channel or any other gear channel for that matter does is the company giving you buckets of cash in exchange for you shilling and saying how great whatever the given product is. Now, I can't speak for everybody else, but I can only tell you that in my experience, while there have been some, not as many as you would think, cash exchanges for videos, I have never once been asked, say good things about this. If anything, the manufacturer is just wanting to make sure I get the accurate information. I don't need to say that it's awesome, and I don't need to say that you need to go buy it, but I do need to say that, like, it's got a maple neck and that it's got these kind of tuners. Like, I need the specifics to be accurate, but I don't need to sway you into buying it. And once again, that is the truth here. So I am getting no dollars, no currency, no paper cash, no credit, nothing of that nature for this video. I am, however, getting the bass itself in exchange for the work and the time and the effort it takes to put this together. So the way this video started out is I got an email from my friend Ashley over at Warwick, who, if you didn't know, as of 2018 took over the distribution for Sadowsky, and asked me if I'd like to do a video on the new MetroExpress. I'll be honest with you, my first instinct, my first reaction was, I love Warwick, I don't really know about Sadowsky, because around here we have a term, I think Chuck coined it, but the term is FSO, and it stands for Fender Shaped Object. And as you can tell, this definitely fits that bill. So I took a look at the product, I saw, again, yeah, obviously another FSO, and I thought, well, why would I want this, or really, I mean, honestly, any kind of boutique-y FSO, but obviously we're talking about Sadowsky, so for the sake of this video, why would I want the Sadowsky Fender-shaped object instead of a Fender? So I just responded honestly to her. I said, here's what I would like to do. I'd like to put it up against whatever Fender closest fits this vibe in both build, price point, electronics, etc., and just shoot them out. Why would I want this over that one? So again, to further shatter the misconception that the manufacturer is just feeding me lines to try to sell you on the product, not only was she interested and intrigued by the idea, but she wants my honest feedback about what I like and dislike about this. I don't remember the exact words she used, but it was something along the lines of, don't just say nice things because you're making the video, just be honest about what you dislike. And there's a couple things about this that I dislike, but there's a couple things that I like and prefer to the other brand. So we're going to shoot this out against 3 different Fenders, because when I did a little bit more research into this specific model, there are 3 Fenders from 3 different price tiers that kind of suit the bill in terms of head-to-head in different areas. So I'm going to give you some specs later, but just to quickly paint it, this is a Chinese-made instrument. It's a PJ. It's got an active preamp, and it's right in that, God, I could be wrong. I'm going to look it up in the editing and put it right here, but it's right in that $1,000 price range. So because the bass is built and assembled and whatever other word in China, I'm going to put it up against one of my other favorite Chinese basses. This is the Squier Vintage Modified Precision Bass. Now, obviously, it's not a PJ and it's not active, but we don't really care about the tone of this one. I want to see how the left hand feels, how the overall quality of the build feels. The one thing I can't do is, because these 3 Fenders are on loan from Zounds, one issue I run into, or have run into with Squiers, is that the wood is a little bit, we'll just call it lesser quality than some other woods. The amount of pick guard screws or control plate screws that have stripped or even the pickup mounting screws. Like Chinese-made stuff or cheaper overseas, you know, kind of second market, budget market, whatever you want to call it, it seems like the wood strips a little bit more readily than some of the higher quality, maybe more dense instruments. So again, both of these being Chinese instruments, I just kind of want to feel, you know, what does the neck feel like? What does the construction feel like? But we'll get into the specifics of what I like better about this and what I like better about this, but they're both Chinese instruments, so let's just focus on feel with these two. And now swinging all the way to the opposite corner, one of the most expensive Fenders that you can buy outside of a signature model, this is the American Ultra Precision bass. Now, not to spoil anything, but there are a couple points about this instrument that are a little bit more premium and a little bit nicer than the Sadowsky, but the main focus of comparing it to this bass is that Sadowsky is very happy and very proud of these pickups and this preamp. So I figured, okay, well, if this preamp and these pickups are that mind-blowing and eye-opening, they should be able to compete against what I think is Fender's top-tier electronic setup. So the comparison between these two is going to predominantly be in the tone. Again, they're both PJ. They both have an active preamp. Again, not to spoil anything, there's some other things about the construction of this one that I prefer to this one. Not everything, but some things. But these are going to be primarily tone. And finally, it is the Goldilocks bass. This is the Mexican-made Player Plus. Now, this has a lot of similarities to the American Ultra that we just looked at, but it's also obviously got a lot of similarities to the Sadowsky, the main one being the price point. But for that price point, I'm going to really just look over this one with a fine-tooth comb. We're going to look at feel, we're going to look at components, parts, setup, obviously electronics package, weight, which I can just settle that right now. Virtually identical. So basically, for give or take the same budget, which one of these is the better value, the better buy, and the better all-around experience? All of the tones that you're going to hear are recorded directly into the Radial JD7, into a Tascam Model 16 set at unity gain, and straight into Logic Pro 10. In other words, absolutely no amp or pedal or preamp other than the preamps built into the basses themselves were used in the tones of this video. Now, I know I said just a moment ago that the tone wasn't really a factor with the Squier, but just for fun, let's hear it anyway. So obviously it doesn't take long to figure out that tonally these are two completely different animals, which is why we're not comparing the tone of this to the Squier. But what we are comparing is the feel and the build quality. Now, just to be thorough, I am gonna read you some of the specs on this bass as per obligation, but again, at no point am I gonna try to sell you on it. So apparently the MetroExpress basses have a higher quality craftsmanship all around. Now again, I wouldn't know that for sure because this is my very first Sadowsky experience, but if you do have one of the older Metro line basses, they say, and I believe them, that this is higher quality. Now, the reason I believe them is because Warwick is now responsible for putting out the Chinese versions of these, and I am a big believer and a big fan of Warwick, so if they're overseeing the production, I have faith in it. One big point cosmetically that really doesn't have anything to do with this particular comparison is that the headstock logo is different. Now the headstock just looks like a bona fide Sadowsky with that logo. And I gotta say, that looks pretty nice. And also, this particular model right here, the one I'm holding in my hands, this is what they call a promo type. I believe that as this video is being released, these are already available, but this is one of the prototype, or promo type as they call it, models. So from my understanding, one of the glaring differences between this one I'm holding and the one that you would potentially hold if you decided you like this is that the production models are going to have a roasted maple neck, which I think is really cool, but also I'm kind of bummed I didn't get a roasted maple neck because the neck is one of the things that I'm not psyched on. And it's not really the profile, it's the finish. I'm like a stickler with the way it feels on my left thumb, which is going to bring us into the Squier. So obviously, when you look closely at this neck, it appears to be either unfinished or a very light satin. I don't know for sure. They did not give me that specification in the literature. So right off the bat, you know, I don't know if I'm a fan of gloss necks because I tend to if I get a bass with a gloss neck, whether it's a Gibson with nitro or something else with poly, I knock it down with either steel wool or Scotch-Brite or 220 grit sandpaper, whatever I have to just lightly knock it down and smooth it out. I prefer that. So with this Squier, my instinct is telling me that it's a little too glossy, that it's, you know, I'm gonna stick to it if I get sweaty. But when we go far the opposite way, I don't really like this unfinished that much either. We're gonna get to this in a minute, but both of the Fenders have this kind of satin finish that I just prefer the feel of in my hand. Again, I'm not a luthier. I've never built one. I don't really know the physics of wood that much. I can just tell you what I'm feeling, as uneducated as I may sound. The Fenders, whether they be the Mexican or the American, particularly American, there's just something about them that feels more, I guess it feels more dense. It feels more solid. It feels like it's got more weight to it, but not weight in a heavy on your shoulder way, just solid. It just feels more solid. That being said, while this one doesn't feel as solid as the Squier, now again, I don't know if the Squier feels more dense because of that finish. That could very well be. I don't know. I don't own that bass. I can't knock it down to no finish to find out. But as it stands, that is my least favorite part of this bass. The way the neck is finished makes it feel, like immediately makes it feel cheap to me. If you put a blindfold on and you just handed me this or the Squier, my mind would think that the Squier feels better. Not because of the gloss, but because of the density. But moving away from the neck finish, I have to say I prefer the neck radius. The profile on this is not bad either. It's a little thinner, which, again, going back to the Warwick thing for a minute, those Corvette necks, they're like super thick and I love it. I didn't think that I would like a thick neck, but I really do. Maybe because I have one. But the profile on this doesn't bother me. It doesn't feel too thin or anything. But the radius is the unsung hero of this neck. Despite it feeling a little cheaper to me because of the finish, the radius, I think, makes up for that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a 12-inch radius, which is a little bit closer, not a little bit closer, exactly the same as Gibson, which, as you probably know, Gibson is like my favorite manufacturer. Again, Warwick is probably my second or third favorite manufacturer, and they also are known for a flatter fretboard radius. So this feels right at home in that sense. The Fenders are usually 9.5. I know they market it as being more comfortable and more form-fitting to your hand, but for some reason it's uncomfortable for me. It makes me constantly feel like a beginner, like I'm stumbling over the strings in my own fingers. So big points on the Sadowsky for me for being a flatter radius. And again, I have the promo type. The regular production model is going to have a roasted neck, which, if we go off point for just a minute, this is a Sire Marcus Miller bass that's undergoing some surgery at the moment, but this has the roasted maple neck. Now, I don't know if the Sadowsky is going to have the gloss fretboard like this does. That doesn't matter to me. It's all about right here. And this appears to be unfinished, but something about the roasted of the neck makes it just feel awesome. So kind of why I wish I would have gotten the roasted Sadowsky, because I think I would have, my left thumb, I think, would have liked it a lot better the way that I like this one. But I'm not reviewing that one, I'm reviewing this one, and in an effort to be as honest with you as possible, I'm going to have to say that this is tied with the Squier for different reasons. Obviously, I much prefer the radius of this fretboard, but I prefer the density of the Squier. And, you know, moving away from the left hand and just kind of on the lap or on the strap and just playing it, they both feel quality. Like, they don't feel like they're gonna break. I don't really want to try to strip one of these mounting screws, so I'm not going to. But I would say that they're on par, just for different reasons. I like the density of the Squier, I like the radius of this. So with that, let's move on to the American Fender. Now, I know I said a moment ago that all of these tones were recorded direct, and I mean, they were, but really, do we need to hear every single one of just the bass? Because that's not how most of us are going to hear it. Most of us are going to plug it into our favorite amp, favorite pedal, favorite etc. It's hard to know exactly which amp you have, but it's a usually safe bet that we're all familiar with the Ampeg SVT. So let's actually hear these basses through a flat SVT to get more or less a sound that's probably going to be more familiar to you in your general setup. Moving back real quick to a couple specifications that I agreed to say. The Sadowsky has new J-style pickups that are silent. The 4-string is a combination of Alnico 5 and Alnico 3 noise-canceling split coil, whereas the 5-string, which we don't have here, is a noise-canceling stacked coil, and the electronics cavity is copper shielded. Now, the split coil noise-canceling J is something we've seen before in companies like Aguilar, Seymour Duncan, and my beloved EMG. Essentially, what's happening is underneath, there's one coil that's responsible for the E and the A, and there's another coil responsible for the D and G, and they are, what are they, reverse polarity and parallel? It's essentially like the way a P bass is constructed, but in a J bass housing. And to the best of my understanding, the reason that the side-by-side J is a little bit more desirable than the stacked J is that the tone doesn't really change in the parallel coil as it does in the stacked, where the stacked gets a little bit darker, like we've seen in companies like Seymour Duncan with their hot stack or their classic stack. They're a little bit fatter, warmer, and darker than their true single coil counterpart. Now moving over to this Fender American, again, another noiseless J. I believe it's constructed in a similar fashion. I do find it interesting that the Fender goes as far to tell you that the P is noiseless as well, because that just seems a little redundant. That's the reason that P bass pickups are shaped the way they are, is to be noiseless. So I don't know why you would say that, but sure, okay, cool, thanks. So again, in terms of pickups, the Sadowsky and the American are pretty on par with kind of, you know, super bitchin', hot-rodded, noise-canceling PJ pickups. We've also got a preamp in each model. Now, the big difference is that on the Sadowsky, it's obviously a 2-band. Your control setup is volume, blend, bass, and treble, with the bass knob being a push-pull for active-passive. The Fender, on the other hand, is a 3-band EQ. The control set is volume, blend, a concentric bass treble, and a concentric mid and passive tone with a switch to go from active to passive. Now, aside from Fender's additional EQ band, there are a couple more differences between these preamps. Most notably that the Fender utilizes 18 volts where the Sadowsky is only 9 volts. But the thing that's interesting is the Sadowsky preamp, despite only being 9 volts, is a boost-only circuit with plus 20 dB for each band. The Fender, on the other hand, is cut or boost, and I don't know the decibel rating because it seems like no online retailer has that information. But usually standard cut or boost preamps are like 12, 15, sometimes as high as 18 decibel, but either way, it's not 20. I'm going to just guess that it's plus or minus 15 on the Fender. So like I said, the American Ultra Fender is going up against this Sadowsky primarily in the area of tone. There's a couple other cosmetic and hardware appointments that I think might be a little unfair because it's double the price. But tonally, they're pretty on par. Like I said, they have bitchin' hot-rodded, super cool PJ pickups and a super bitchin' preamp. Now, again, one's 2-band, one's 3-band, one's boost only, one's cut and boost. One is 9 volt, one is 18 volt, one has 20 decibels of boost, the other is probably likely 15. And now just for fun, let's hear how each of these basses interacts with distortion. Now I happen to be partial to the Darkglass B7K. Chances are you are not, based on what I've read in the comments. I'm slowly becoming the only person who likes Darkglass anymore, but hey, that's what we're using, and we're gonna see how each of these preamps hits a very small amount of distortion just to kind of get an idea of where they're pushing. Now, I don't know about you listening to the recorded signals through YouTube and whatever speakers are available to you, but both playing these basses and listening to it in the control room with the Yamaha cool studio monitors, this one seemed to feel more even in its response. The Fender, I thought, was going to take it being an 18-volt preamp. That really didn't seem to mean much. I mean, maybe it did. 18 volts is kind of so you get more headroom. And maybe that's what I'm not liking. It seems like the Fender is a little bit more susceptible to dynamics in maybe not a good way. I like to think that I'm relatively even with my picking dynamics. I've been playing with a pick since I was 13. I'm pretty okay at it. But it just seemed like the bass and the treble would kind of spike out. And when you look at the waveform, you can see that the Sadowsky is tremendously more consistent and even than the Fender is. And again, while the Fender does have an additional band of EQ, I didn't really find myself reaching for it that much. I didn't really care for the mid frequency because when I cut it, it felt too thin, and when I boosted it, it felt too... So that's my technical term for boxy. It just felt too boxy. And I just wanted the mids flat, and if I did cut them, it was only by a little bit to where it kind of didn't really matter that much. Wherever the preset mids are in this, you don't really need the mid knob. So I don't know about you, but for me, I prefer the tone of this preamp. Again, despite it being only 2 bands, boost only, and 9 volts, this one just sounded better. Now, the one thing that I noticed, and you may have noticed, is that even though these are noiseless pickups, the problem that comes in is when this pushes 20 decibels of gain in the top end, there's no way you're going to be 100% whisper quiet. Like, it's just not going to happen. Because the pickups themselves may not be generating any noise, or at least a very trivial amount of noise. No matter what, when you up that gain, there's going to be a little bit of fluorescent noise or what have you, just electrical noise in the room, that at 20 dB is going to be heard. But if you back the treble off even halfway, it's gone. So I don't know if you need plus 20 dB of treble, you might get a smidgen of noise, but most people I don't think need 20 dB of treble, so it is for all intents and purposes noiseless. Okay, now the comparison that really matters. This one's for all the marbles. This is the Fender Mexican-made Player Plus precision bass. There are a lot of similarities between these two, so let's just kind of start at the headstock and go down. First off, you see that the Fender has what appears to be the same tuners as the Squier. My understanding may be a little outdated or may just be straight up incorrect, but what I've come to understand is that while the Mexican series still says Fender and is built in Mexico, it's using predominantly, if not exclusively, Chinese parts, so it's not uncommon to find the same Squier tuners. I don't know about the electronics, I don't think so, but I think the metal parts, the hardware, are no different than the Squier. If we look at the Sadowsky, these are Sadowsky branded lightweight tuners. Taking a quick glance at them, they actually kind of look like the Hipshot Ultralight. So I don't know if this is let's just call it an inspired by design, or if these are licensed. Either way, they definitely look, feel, and perform at a higher caliber than that of the Player Plus. Flipping over to the front, another huge upgrade on the Sadowsky is this, again, appears to be a Hipshot string retainer. The upside to it is it not only pulls down and gives tension at the nut to the D and G strings like you'd expect, it also gets the A string in there, which is something that the Player Plus doesn't have. And honestly, it's something that most FSOs should have, because if you take a close look real quick at the American Ultra, you'll see they have an extra string retainer at that A post for that very reason. That is kind of one issue I have with companies like Fender and, I hate to say it, Gibson. They kind of painfully almost stick to a tradition. Like with that Player Plus, there is no reason for that old school saucer string retainer that only addresses the D and G. Why Fender hasn't come up with a design like this Hipshot one, or maybe Sadowsky one, I don't know. Why they haven't done that, in my opinion, is unacceptable. There are a lot of things in the Fender design that could be upgraded. Maybe that's the reason for all of these super hot rodded FSOs. So why Fender is so stubborn in some of those areas, I don't know. Moving down a little bit more, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what material this nut is. I have found in my experience the nut material is of almost no consequence. Obviously people like a real bone nut or a Graphtec nut, and then some just are straight up plastic. But if you get the bass set up properly, or any instrument, the guitar set up properly, and you get the nut slot cut correctly, that was an inadvertent tongue twister. If you get it cut correctly, in my experience, the material is of no consequence. But that being said, who cares what it's made out of? Check out the Sadowsky with their little Allen wrench adjustment. Again, I never played any of the previous model Sadowskis, but if I didn't know any better, that's straight out of the Warwick camp. And so again, why more companies in general don't do that is beyond me, but it's really cool to see that ease of setup in this bass. And moving on down the fretboard, again, this isn't really a plus or minus, this is just a preference thing. Both of these models come in a maple fretboard or some variant of darker wood fretboard. Now, I will say, I haven't seen the Sadowsky darker rosewood, whatever wood they're using to look like rosewood and evoke the vibe of rosewood. All I can tell you is that the Fender looks like trash. I think Fender's using Pal Ferro. Pal Ferro, in my opinion, is a horrendously ugly wood. Now, this Sadowsky, of course, is the promo type, so it's not roasted. I will say that even though I prefer maple fretboards, I wish that this maple fretboard, and maple neck for that matter, was a slightly darker shade. As you can see on the back of the neck, the Fender is a little bit darker than this one. Again, I don't know how much that matters beyond just aesthetic, but all I do know is that the back of the neck on the Player Plus has that silky kind of satin finish, where this one feels relatively unfinished. So for the left thumb category, I gotta give it to the Fender. If we move a little bit further down, the Fender has a 20 fret fretboard, where the Sadowsky is 21 frets. But more importantly than the number of frets is the Sadowsky has the kind of straight out of Ernie Ball truss rod wheel, where the Fender kind of utilizes that old school, you do it up at the headstock kind of Allen wrench way. So I think it should probably go without saying that the Sadowsky wins in truss rod adjustment. If we turn it over to where the neck joins the body, both of them are a 4-bolt neck join design. The Sadowsky doesn't have the back plate, which, to be fair, I'm not missing it. Each bolt has its own washer. And it seems like this is a small detail, but the square around where the bolts go in, it has been rounded a little bit more in the Sadowsky. So I don't think that's well, no, it's a little bit of a deal that when your hand gets right there, it's a little less sharp right there. So in the rare occurrence that you do need to clear the dust off of fret 19, it doesn't hurt quite as bad. Also looking at the strap pins, the Fender is the normal strap pin that you've come to find on a Fender. The Sadowsky comes with strap locks right out of the bag. That's always a plus. Moving on down the body, again, we've already kind of touched on the pickups and the preamp. The Player Plus is a similar vibe to the American with the PJ setup, 3-band, 18-volt preamp, but it might go without saying that the Player Plus, being kind of the second tier down, isn't really as good as the American, and I didn't really like the American as much as the Sadowsky, but let's hear the Player Plus up against this one anyway. Now I know tone is subjective, I'm just telling you what I thought. I prefer the tone of this one. But moving on down to the bridge, you'll see that the Player Plus has their, I guess it's newer, vintage-inspired high-mass bridge. Unofficially, it's their version of the Leo Kwan Badass, which they first made, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the Geddy Lee American jazz bass, was when that bridge debuted and it had his signature on it, and it's basically, for all intents and purposes, the same shape and same function. It's Fender's version of a Badass. Over here, you still have a high-mass bridge. It's definitely better than the Squier just bent metal one. I did find it interesting that the saddles, for lack of a better word, they're cut in half. So the bottom is flat. The downside, in my experience, is that these little adjustment screws protrude a little bit. So if you're a pick player like me and you kind of palm mute at the bridge, bring some Band-Aids because that's gonna puncture you like quickly. So that might need to be addressed, might need to file those down. I'm not sure exactly, but it's a little uncomfortable, if not painful. So there's that. So I think pound for pound in build quality, in hardware, in miscellaneous components like the strap pins and the adjustable nut, I think the Sadowsky wins, despite the Fender having a couple things I like better, like the feel of the neck and the bridge. I don't know if those two things are enough to warrant, for me at least, getting the Fender over the Sadowsky. Okay, and the last thing to look at if we're going to talk about overall value between the Player Plus and the Sadowsky is the gig bag. But before we get into this, I don't know if it's obvious or not, the Squier comes with no gig bag. It's just wrapped in some kind of soft wrap in the cardboard box. And the Fender American Ultra naturally comes in a super cool hardshell case. I actually really like it. But I guess that's to be expected for a $2,200 bass. Like, it kind of better come with a hardshell case, right? But with these two, they're relatively in the same price point. This is the bag that you get with the Fender. It's kind of flimsy. I guess it's decent. Well, I mean, here's the thing. A lot of us probably have Mexican-made Fenders, so we probably all have experience with this bag. In case you don't, again, it's technically padded, but it's pretty low profile. No pocket up here. There is a, okay, triple pocket. So you got this, opens up here, opens up here. That's not high enough. Here, here, and this little teeny tiny one for, I guess, your tuner down here. So we do have 3 compartments in an otherwise flimsy gig bag. However, with the Sadowsky, we get, I mean, I don't know if I would say that this is quite mono quality, but we're definitely getting closer. Much thicker. It's got the neck rest, which I don't know if you would really need to, but you can kind of Velcro the neck in place. Much more padding just all around, but there's padding on the walls now. And instead of 3 pockets in one position, we have 2 pockets in 2 positions. So it opens up here by the headstock. Little place for your ID, and then there's a little netted pocket just inside of this. Moving down here, we have a rather large pocket with another netted zipper. It doesn't take long for someone to figure out that this is clearly a superior bag than that which comes with the Player Plus. And finally, to wrap it all up, I can sit here for, before editing, over an hour and tell you every single spec and every single little tonal detail about each one of these basses. But really the most important thing is how it translates, how it feels, how it sounds, how it holds up, and maybe even how it looks during a gig. So rewind just a little bit, about a week or so ago from today, I actually took all 4 of these basses out to the New York bridge on the Las Vegas Strip, so Chuck could play each one of them. His band does 4 sets, so it kind of worked out perfectly. He was able to hit each bass for each set. And real quick, the one thing I forgot to mention is that as soon as I got there, I had the order planned. He was going to play the Squier, then the Player Plus, then the American, and then the Sadowsky. I got there about 10 minutes before downbeat, handed him the Squier, first bass to play, plugs it in, the input jack falls into the bass. So luckily, I like to say I wasn't prepared for that to happen, but I guess technically I was. I happened to have my Wallet Ninja in my, surprise, surprise, wallet, and I was able to fix the jack right there on the strip on a park bench, a lunch picnic bench, whatever it's called. So we had to do it a little out of order. He played the Player Plus first, then the Squier, then the American, and then the Sadowsky. So let's just hear what Chuck had to say and what he thought of each of those basses in a live context.
I think it's all just a setup issue. The tone sounded really nice. I didn't find any shrill notes. This isn't the normal sound guy we have, so the mix is a little off for me personally. The bass sounded really good. I heard I had some issues on some of the fingerstyle stuff playing because the way the P pickup is angled, it's slightly higher, but again, that's just a setup thing. Overall, the tone was great. The neck felt very good. The stock pickups, I think they're noiseless, is what I saw. Sounded fine. I liked the feel of the neck. It was fast. I didn't have any hang-ups. No sharp frets, which was surprising. My only complaint was the way the P pickup was angled. It was stuttering a lot of my faster fingerstyle playing stuff, and it was just a placement thing. It just kept making me reset my hand. So everything else felt good. I don't know if I would pay $12.99, but I think that's an $8.99 bass for sure. I feel that's very much so an $8.99 bass. I wouldn't do over $1,000 for that. No way. Dude, if you put tape over this headstock and I didn't see it was a Squier, I would for sure think it was a higher end Fender, like a Mexican series Fender, right? I don't know if they call it that anymore. That's what I grew up knowing. The Neck feels really good, a little overly glossy, and I don't know if it's a consistent thing with the Squiers. It feels okay though. It's not bad, easily fixed. You can get that right. Out the box, I don't know if Chris did anything to this. The action felt really good. No sharp frets. I had no issues playing this at all. This was first out the gig bag. Chris handed it to me on the gig. The bass has a great growl to it. It's on a nice bite, but this neck, I was really impressed. Like, everybody craps on Squiers, and I don't know why. There was a time where they were not as good, or they were inconsistent, I should say. But I think now, probably in the last couple of years, Squier, well, at least this whatever this model is, Squiers have really like leveled up their game as far as how the feel goes. They still provide a great aesthetic, but they paid attention to what everybody was always like citing as far as like Squiers go. Neck felt good, frets felt great, action felt good. 10 out of 10 would play this again. 100%. Very nice feeling bass. I liked it more than the Player Plus, for sure. Can I cuss? Oh my fucking god. This bass feels amazing. Everything about this bass is perfect. The neck feels amazing. I'm telling you, I'm confirmed. Gloss necks, hate them. This does not have it, and it is smooth like butter. I love everything about this. I love PJs on a 4-string. 5-string, not a fan. 4-string PJs, sounds great. Neck feels amazing. String height and intonation felt super smooth. This bass kills everything I've done so far. There's a lot of bite because of the 18-volt preamp on this bass. It's got a lot of grit that's natural when you dig, but it's not overbearing where it takes away from the low end of the signal from this bass. That 18-volt preamp, whatever they're doing, whatever Fender doing with this Ultra, bro, well done. The preamp on this bass, everything about this is amazing. I don't know what all these are, and it doesn't matter. This is all at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, and it sounds, chef's kiss. This is the best one so far. I don't know what's gonna top it. This one, for me, kills everything. What is there to say? It's amazing. I love this bass. Oh my god. Bro, this bass is fucking rad. Hands down. Okay, look. So tone-wise, I feel like it's on par with the Ultra, okay? This preamp, as far as its setup goes with a boost, sick. I love that they took that direction. I feel like the Ultra is definitely more of a comfort zone tone, where if you're familiar with that active preamp Fender kind of tone, that's gonna be a sweet spot. But this sounds so fucking good. Holy shit, everything. It was very even. It didn't have any spikes when I went between effects. The clean tone was perfect. I've always said it. 4-string PJs have a certain magic that they just consistently deliver between the power of a P pickup and that bridge mid balance of the jazz pickup. Sadowsky kills with this tone. This PJ setup for the Sadowsky, honestly, it's probably, because it's different, my favorite of the night. It will go Sadowsky, Fender Ultra, Squier, and then the Player Plus. The Player Plus had better tone, but the Squier had a better feel on the neck. That's what it is. So if you're going for a $500 budget, that's what it is. But if you got the bread and you have the desire for something amazing as far as a PJ setup goes with a very consistent full tone, Sadowsky kills, bar none.
What would you guess the price is?
2,000? Shut the fuck up. Really?
Actually, a little under. It's like 11 and change.
No fucking way. This is cheaper than the Ultra?
This is on par with the Mexican, price-wise.
No.
So which one was the better value?
This! By far. The Sadowsky. Listen. Yeah, dude. Okay, so that keeps happening. I don't know why. The Sadowsky, for that price point, 100% it's number one. It would go, if you got the bread, Sadowsky, Fender Ultra, but that's like $2,000. That's well over $2,000. This bass kills everything. Everything. So Squier 500, fine, but you're gonna wind up changing the pickups, doing some other stuff. It's gonna cost you more money. If you're gonna do that, get the Player Plus. If you have the money for the Player Plus, wait, get the Sadowsky. Sadowsky crushed everything, especially at that price point. The neck was fast, it's not gloss, the pickups sound amazing. They're Sadowsky stock pickups, by the way, and that boost on everything on this preamp, killing. 100% Sadowsky killed for the night, 100%.
Okay, so I believe that just about wraps it up, and I think I have answered the question that overall, generally speaking, pound for pound, rounding it off, I think this beats just about every level of Fender that we put it up against. Now, of course, there's little things like the Fender's finish on the back of the neck I prefer, little things. But if we're just going to go overall, generally speaking, I see it. I guess I see now why you would go with the Sadowsky over the Fender. Like I said at the top of the video, I didn't receive any financial compensation for this video, but I did get to keep this. Now, with that being said, while I do like this bass, I am an EMG guy, so I want to put it out to the viewers. If I were to pop a passive PJ set of EMG, whether it be the Geezer Butler or the PJ-HZ, does that make it any less of a Sadowsky? I guess another way to put it is the Sadowsky magic of the tone more here, or is it more here? So if I were to run an EMG passive PJ through this same preamp, do I still have a Sadowsky? I guess if I asked Jason Newstead, he would still say yes. So maybe I'll take his word for it. But either way, let me know in the comments if you own one of the older ones, if you own this one, if you're thinking about getting this one, or if you hate them. Just let me know. It helps the algorithm, and I'm kind of curious. So I think that's just about all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I can edit this down from what I'm seeing right now, 1 hour and 8 minutes. Hopefully I can whittle that down to a little bit shorter to keep you watching this long and get to this point in the video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you whenever it is that I see you.